Hello, everyone. Welcome to Just for the Love of Reading, where we read books to inspire, motivate, and empower. Today's book in our book club series is titled Harlem Rhapsody by Victoria Christopher Murray. This novel falls into the following genres: historical fiction, biographical fiction, and women's fiction. The setting of this novel takes place in Harlem, New York, USA, during an era labeled the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was a scholarly, social, and cultural movement that existed for African Americans during the 1920s and 1930s. The protagonist in this biographical fiction novel is Jessie Redmond Fauset. Jessie Redmond Fauset was an educator, author, essay writer, editor, and poet. Named as the midwife of the Harlem Renaissance, Jessie Redmond Fauset played a major role in shaping African American literature. Another historical figure in this novel is William Edward Bouchard Du Bois, also known as W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois was a socialist, writer, and civil rights activist in the United States of America. He was also the co-founder of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as the NAACP. The NAACP is the largest civil rights organization that exists in the United States, and the NAACP still exists to this day. W.E.B. Du Bois was also one of the co-founders and editors of the Crisis newspaper. Other historical figures that are in this novel and are well known for being part of the Harlem Renaissance era include Langston Hughes, a celebrated poet, Countee Cullen, a prominent poet, Nella Larsen, a novelist, Zora Neale Hurston, an author, Jean Toomer, a writer and author, and Claude McKay, a Jamaican-American writer and poet. Other supporting characters in this novel are Bella Fawcett, Jessie's stepmother, Mary Ellen, Jessie's stepsister, Nina Dubois, W.E.B. Du Bois' wife and mother of his children, and Miss Ovington. Miss Ovington serves as the antagonist to Jessie in this novel. She does not take a liking to Jessie upon meeting her, as she suspects that Jessie is involved with W.E.B. Du Bois. And she doesn't make Jessie feel welcome at the Crisis, right? And is constantly criticizing her on the work that she does. More on that later. Now let's get into the plot of this novel. Jessie has accepted the role of literary editor at the Crisis. And before she accepted this role, she was a high school French teacher in Philadelphia. However, she chooses to accept this role as literary editor of the Crisis in Harlem, New York. And the Crisis is a magazine that centered around showcasing the works of talented African American authors, writers, and poets. This newspaper, The Crisis, is the official newspaper of the NAACP. Now, in regards to Jessie's personal life, Jessie struggles with her deep love for W.E.B. Du Bois, who is in fact a married man. W.E.B. Du Bois was the individual that actually created the position for Jessie as literary editor at the Crisis. He even found a place for her to live in Harlem, New York, in addition to offering her this role. Jessie and W.E.B. Du Bois were not only lovers, but they were intellectual equals, right? They were scholars and, who had the same vision, had a lot of the same interests, and they were also part of the same social circles as well. So it wasn't uncommon for them to be seen at the same places and events together. Jessie was initially okay with her role in W.E.B. Du Bois' life, right? She wasn't, according to the story, she wasn't naive to her position or her role in his life, because, she didn't have a desire to be married. And so she was really okay with playing her role in his life at that time. But as she started to spend more time with him and they started to spend more time together at the Crisis, they were living in the same city, her feelings began to become enmeshed with his own life. And so the reader is able to see how this starts to shift for her. Her stepmother and her sister, right, Bella Fawcett and Mary Ellen, continue to be the voice of reason for Jessie, reminding her that her involvement with a married man is not only morally wrong, but it is a big risk that she's taking, as it'll interfere or ruin her reputation and break her heart. As her sister Mary Ellen reminds her that no matter what happens, W.E.B. Du Bois' first obligation will always be to his wife. So, the reader wants to know, what strides will Jessie Redmond Fawcett make in her career? Will Jessie end her love affair with W.E.B. Du Bois? And what accomplishments and strides will African Americans make during the Harlem Renaissance? What did I learn from this novel? I really learned a lot about the Harlem Renaissance era. Now, I've heard of it before, but this was the first time that I was able to actually read about it and just learn more about what that era represented and its importance to African American history. So the Harlem Renaissance was an era that really highlighted the talents of African Americans in literature, movies, art, and theater, right? So this was an opportunity for talented African Americans to showcase their work to the masses, to their own community. And it was also an era that highlighted the social issues that African Americans were facing during the 1920s and 1930s, including, but not limited to, systematic racism and unfortunate events such as lynching. The African Americans during this time were really able to dismantle the racial stereotypes of African Americans that were displayed to the masses at that time. They were able to take control of their own narrative, take control of their own representation, and represent African Americans in a positive light. This era really helped to dismantle the negative stereotypes of African Americans living in the United States. The Harlem Renaissance era has inspired me to continue to learn more about historical periods, what emerged from these historical periods, and most importantly, the individuals who laid the foundation and shaped these historical periods. Just so inspiring, so amazing, that despite what the obstacles that these individuals faced, they still had the courage and the resilience to press on and to fight for the greater good and to keep the greater goal in mind. And so, again, the Harlem Renaissance continues to inspire me to do those very things. How was I motivated by this novel? I was motivated by the story of our novel's protagonist, Jessie Redmond Fawcett. Jessie Redmond Fawcett began her career as a high school French teacher in Philadelphia before she accepted her role as literary editor of The Crisis in Harlem, New York. And as the reader, I was able to see that Jessie still had that educator role in her as she continued to keep in contact with her former students and continued to provide them with the guidance and nurture them as they went along into their own journey and were working on finding their own paths. Jessie played a major role in supporting her former students. And I was able to see this as her role of literary editor. She still had that educator gift within her to just see the potential of amazing individuals and to nurture them and support them and encourage them and to really show through her actions that she was there to support them. And not only did she support and nurture the early careers of, key historical figures in the Harlem Renaissance, but she edited their work and published their work. And so she gave them the opportunity to be seen towards the world. And I really enjoyed reading that part of the novel, just her genuine care and concern for uplifting the youth, the young people, those who were unsure of themselves. But, being an educator, she was able to see their talent and their potential and their gifts even before they were able to. And she really did an amazing job of nurturing their careers. And so that was just so motivating to see just the gift that she was given and the way that she used her gift to support and uplift others as well. Not only was Jessie an educator and a literary editor, but she did a phenomenal job in those roles, but she was also an author. As a reader, I was able to learn that she actually published her first novel titled There Is Confusion. And so this was another thing to add to her many accomplishments and pursuits. And I was just really motivated overall by Jessie's ambitious nature. She had a very ambitious nature. She believed in herself. She worked extremely hard. She was dedicated to her craft. And she was so ambitious, so much so that she actually wanted to become the editor of The Crisis. So we know that she's the literary editor of The Crisis, but she just really wanted to reach higher levels in her career. And she wanted to become the editor of The Crisis. And she believed that W.E.B. Du Bois, who was the editor of The Crisis, would eventually, give her that role. And I was able to just see that she just had great dreams for herself. And to also keep in mind the time that she was in, right? This is during the 1920s in the United States of America, where there was still a lot of segregation and racial challenges that she would face as an African American. But she was also a woman. And so there was also certain limitations that she had during that time. However, as the reader, it just still never stopped her. It never stopped her from dreaming big. It never stopped her from aiming high. It didn't stop her from wanting to reach new levels and become bigger than, do more than she already has accomplished. And so, again, just as an educator, an editor, a writer, an author, and just striving for greater things, I was just so motivated to not only continue to strive for excellence in everything that I do, but to also understand that the sky is the limit. especially as a woman living in this time that we're in. Times are completely different, and there are so many opportunities for women in general. And to really not take that for granted, and to understand that the sky is really the limit. And so, again, I am just so motivated by Jessie's story and all of her accomplishments in her professional life. So inspired. How was I empowered by this novel? Well, I will say that I was empowered to remember the important fact that it's important that I can always walk away from situations that no longer serve me. And I am referring to this case in the novel with Jessie's love affair with W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a married man. Now, I'd like to start off by saying that, her decision to continue her relationship with Du Bois, knowing that he was a married man, was morally wrong, right? It wasn't right. It was wrong. She was aware of the situation that he was in, and she still chose to pursue a relationship with him. In the novel, the reader is able to see how Jessie's reputation begins to become, her reputation becomes an issue in the novel, right? As people within their circle, within their community of scholars and writers and authors and poets, people within their community are able to, see that something is going on, and they start to, people are beginning to talk about them. And Jessie naively thought that her and Du Bois were doing a good job of keeping their relationship a secret. She didn't really think that people knew about it the way in which they did. And it is her brother in the novel who pays her a visit. He pays her a visit and really lets her know, like, you know what, sister, there's a lot of people talking about you and this man. People are aware that something may be going on. And so I'm recommending or advising you to stop this relationship. So it was her brother coming to speak to her that allowed the reader also to understand that, people were talking about her and her relationship with him, and it was beginning to affect her reputation. Now, despite this talk from her brother, Jessie still felt that she had everything under control. She believed that she had her career ambitions, and those were also very important to her. And there was also a part of her that didn't want to let go of her relationship with W.E.B. Du Bois, right? They were like-minded individuals, intellectual equals, and she appreciated the support that he provided for her and the opportunities that he gave her. And so she was not ready to let that go. And again, she thought that she had everything under control. Or so she thought. So there's a point in the novel when Jessie begins to realize that the dynamic of the relationship was not as secure as she thought that it was. As she begins to realize that W.E.B. Du Bois had other women in his life other than herself and his wife. So it's this realization that the reader is able to see Jessie's emotional control over her situation with Du Bois change. It starts to shift, and she begins to lose control. And the reader is able to see how this newfound information and newfound knowledge begins to affect her daily life and her ability to function. Okay? And so this is where you would consider a trouble in paradise scenario, right? Where things are not as secure as the individual thinks that it is. And another important point to mention in the novel is the fact that there are instances where W.E.B. Du Bois and Jessie have disagreements, right? They have disagreements over decisions over the newspaper, over certain things that Jessie wants to do. And it's within these disagreements that Jessie is really able to see the reality of her situation based on the way that Du Bois answered or her questions, the way that he spoke to her, the decisions that he made, the things that he said to her, and the actions that he took really allowed for her to really see a different side of him that she never expected to see. And not only did she see a different side of him, but she was also able to see the reality of their dynamic. And it wasn't as secure as she thought it was. So in addition to her learning about his other relationships, as well as, the roadblocks and disagreements that they were having, this is when Jessie began to really open her eyes and see the reality of her relationship dynamic with this man. So Jessie reaches a point within her journey when she really begins to see her relationship with W.E.B. Du Bois for what it really is. She begins to really understand that she won't get the credit and opportunities that she wants from him. She won't get it, right? The only way that she'll be able to get it is if he's willing to give it to her. And she also realizes that her career can only go so far as much as he is willing to let it, based on the opportunities that he gives her. And she also begins to see that she thought she held a certain position and a certain level of priority in his life, and through the interactions and situations that happened between the two over time, she really begins to see that it's not the case, and that her position is not as secure as she thought it was. And so the reader is able to see how Jessie is able to really see her own self-worth and to understand the importance of her, creating her own narrative, not one that is given to her. The reader is able to see that Jessie eventually finds her self-worth, and she really begins to understand and believe that she deserves more for herself than what Du Bois is offering her. And that is such an empowering moment in the story as a woman. And just as an overall lesson to be learned, I truly believe that, we may not always make wise choices as human beings, but the courage to walk away when the realization of our situation, when it actually hits us, is a reminder that we don't have to stay in a situation, in a mistake that we have spent years making. And so that is how I was inspired by Jessie's, empowered by Jessie's situation in that regard. So, what did I love about this novel? I am a historical fiction reader, okay? That is my favorite genre. But to add a biographical fiction to a historical fiction novel, I didn't even know that existed. I think this might be my first time reading a novel with these two genres intertwined. And I loved it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. I couldn't wait to read it every chance that I get, even if it was a few minutes. I was, getting a page or two in from this amazing novel. I really enjoyed reading about the biographical fiction of these characters in the novel. It gave them a voice. It gave them character, it gave them personality, and it was really nice to hear about historical figures in the context of a novel, other than the regular way of hearing them, as figures from the past, right? Like when you just read a synopsis about them and you learn about their contributions to history. But reading them in the form of a story was really amazing, and I believe that our author, Victoria Christopher Murphy, did a fantastic job of portraying our protagonist in such a great way, and she really did a phenomenal job of creating this beautiful story. So I really, really enjoyed reading this. Such an amazing, interesting, page turner kind of story. I also enjoyed learning about the Harlem Renaissance. Through this story, I was really able to see and understand what an important time it was for African Americans. Not only to really understand the issues and the challenges that they still face, but it was an amazing opportunity of hope, an opportunity of hope for change, for positive change. It was an opportunity for positive representation. It was an opportunity for talented individuals to showcase their talent and to use that talent to reach the masses. And I really believe that these individuals, especially Jesse, as well as Dubois, really understood their role as scholars and the important role that they had in inspiring others to do better, to be better, and to see themselves in a positive light. And so the Harlem Renaissance, oh my goodness, such an important time in African American history, again, filled with hope for them and talent that was showcased. I really enjoyed just reading about the foundation, how their careers started. And it was just amazing to read. I really enjoyed this novel so much. So, what are your thoughts on this novel, Harlem Rhapsody by Victoria Christopher Murray? What are your thoughts on the plot of this novel? What did you learn about the historical figures mentioned in this novel? What did you learn about the Harlem Renaissance era from this novel? What did you already know about the historical figures and the Harlem Renaissance from this novel? Lastly, what are your thoughts on our novel's protagonist, Jessie Redmond Fawcett? I'd love to hear your thoughts and your comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.